Hello, welcome to another tutorial with me, Azenquor. So last time we were here, we were looking at modeling dice in Blender. So our end result when we were finished was something looking a little bit like this. And what we're going to be doing today is adding on top of that to build something more. Something with a bit more texture. Alright, so let's get into it. So what we're doing today, we're gonna build something like this. Right, the aim is to add some texture on the surface and create somewhat a bit of reflectivity on that surface in order to capture what we're capturing. So if you look at a full photo, which we just got off Google just now, it's really just a simple image of some dice resting on the ground. Of course, we're probably going to keep our dice, floating in midair, just cause. And so we're going to create that. So I'm using PureRef as my little reference editor. It's a free software you can use to overlay references on top of something that you're working on. So that's just the reference. Let's jump back into it. So what we want to do, first of all, is we're going to select our plane. We can just double click on that plane, or you can press F2 to rename it. And we're just going to call it wood. Or we can call it floor. I'll call it floor for now. Alright, so we've got the floor, we've got a dice 1, dice 2. The aim really is to get some texture on the floor. Now, outside of your standard layout, Blender actually has a few more workspaces that you can work in, and one that we're going to be looking at specifically is the UV editing. Now, typically when you're in UV editing mode, it puts the selected object in edit mode so that you're able to then more properly UV map it. So let's jump back to layout first of all. We're going to add to our floor a new material. So we're going to select on that material properties there in your properties panel. Click on that and we're going to call this material wood. Right. So when we were doing the dice tutorial, we actually added base colors based on colors. So what we're going to be doing this time is we're going to be adding instead an image texture. So we're just going to select on that yellow dot and just navigate over to where it says image texture. It turns black because it's expecting an image that has not yet loaded. And so we're going to open up. Oh wait, let's not forget we actually need to get a texture. So let's jump back here and jump back to our site here. So there's multiple places you can get free textures online. Polygon is one. That's an ad. Polygon is one. This is another one called ambientcg.com. AmbientCG has free textures online, and so we found this one here. Let's just navigate. This is wood 018. So if you were to just jump to ambientcg.com before even selecting anything else, all right, just jump there. And we're going to be looking at PBR surfaces, as physics-based rendering surfaces. Right, you do have a few object selections here or material selections here, but we want to choose PBR surfaces because that's going to give us a robust selection of textures or images that can properly manipulate how we want the wood to look on camera. So let's choose keyword wood. We're going to navigate to one of them that we find useful. Now if we look back at our reference here, it's somewhat of a red wood, but you can see that very fine grain in there, and we want to get something that can, if not match that, be relatively similar, because you can somewhat see the reflections in the wood, and we also want to convey that to when we're doing what we're doing. So let's just quickly run through some of these options that we see here and just pick one that resonates with what we want to accomplish. Now we were looking before at, I think it was this one. I'm going to choose this one. This one is wood 09. The one beside it is wood 07. And it actually has that match of the red wood. And we also have this one. I think this is the one we're looking at before, 018. Much of them are very similar, just the direction of the grain seems different. And this one actually has those little holes in there. So what we're going to be doing is selecting which PBR map we want to use. So you have between 1K, 2K, 4K, 8K. Now, the higher the resolution, of course, the more space it's going to take up and the more pressure it's going to be on the rendering, because a higher quality image just calls for more resources. So to balance it out, we're going to stick with 4K. And once you download that and put that in your downloads, just what we're going to be doing, as I've already downloaded mine before. So let's jump back to Blender. And what we're going to do is open up this. You have to extract your folder. It's going to give you a zip folder. You have to extract it first. So let me just show you what that process is like. So once you hit download, just by clicking on this thing, 4K jpg.zip, it's going to generate for you these textures. And I've already, as I said, downloaded mine before. So textures, I'm going to just leave it as that. You're going to get a zip file which you can navigate to. It's going to open up this, and you can choose extract all, which is going to extract for you everything that we see here. Right, so that would be this folder, which gives us several images. Let me just carry you through what they look like. So I'm going to look at extra large. So we have a preview of what the material looks like on a spherical surface. We have an MTLX file. This one is the base color itself. You have a displacement map. We got a normal map, which is going to create those grooves for us. We have a normal map. This is for DirectX, by the way. This one is for OpenGL, right? So the normal maps work different depending on what settings you have for your renderer. And you have roughness, which controls how light bounces off that surface. By default, when you apply an image to your surface with simply just the base color, it's going to be a flat, smooth surface. And that roughness map is going to help us to have that variance in terms of the roughness of the material itself, in terms of when light bounces off of it. So let's jump to Blender again. So as we said before, you have created your material. Now we're going to just make sure that we're going to apply a new material. So we could do new material, which is where we would actually have to paint on a material, but we're not going to be doing that today. We're going to be just opening this, and we're going to navigate over to our folder that we have saved our file. So I have textures, wood, and what I'm going to start off with is just this one, the color texture. As you can see here, as for base color, press open, and we get just a very smooth surface. Of course, the wooden material itself isn't smooth, but what we're going to do is just layer on. We're going to keep building up on what we see, because right now you're seeing this is what it would look like in the surface. We don't see anything like reflectivity or anything like that. Now if we wanted the material to be reflective, that would be our metalness. If we carry that all the way to 1, you would start seeing some reflections in there if the roughness was down, right? So we should be seeing some things here, right? I'm assuming because we're in the cycles, we're in EV, we're in cycles, we start seeing that reflectivity there. So let's currently work in GPU mode. That will give us this material. By the way, if your machine doesn't have a GPU, you probably won't get the movements or the navigation of this particular thing very smoothly. So let's jump back to our material, selecting that wooden material, that floor. We got wood, and so for the first one we have our surface. Our base color is the wooden texture. Now we need to work with the roughness. Roughness is also going to give you another image. So that dot here allows you to then jump back to what type of input you want. So we're going to also use this one, and we're going to go up to, again, image texture. Now it's going to ask you where you want to get your images from. If you already had preloaded all the images at once, you could always choose this browse image. But we're going to choose open. Again, we're navigating to our folder, and we have a roughness map right here. So we open that, and what that's going to do for us, rather than me controlling the roughness with the slider, the colors, what you begin to see is that our roughness is controlled by an image, right? So in some instances, right, we may have some parts of the material being rough versus not. Now, in our roughness map, and I'll show you an example of what that looks like, we're just gonna jump quickly over to our UV editing, or we could create something for our image editor, but we got UV editing, and this is what you're gonna see. Right, so it's gonna give you a relatively gray map. That gray essentially represents somewhere in between very, very smooth and not smooth at all, or very, very rough. And because it's gray, it's going to line somewhere between the 0.5 area. The lighter it is in terms of white, the more rough it is. The lesser it is, or the grayer it is, or the darker it is, it's going to tend towards the 0. So if it's at 1, it's going to be fully rough, which is matte like paper, M-A-T-T-E, that is matte like paper, or shiny like a mirror or the surface of a phone screen. In terms of when light bounces, it doesn't scatter. All right, so that's that part there. Let's jump back to our layout, and that's 2 things that we have. Now let's check out what other materials we have in terms of what other images we have as our material. We have one more, if I'm not mistaken, right? We also have displacement map. We also have a normal map, right? So these are other materials we can use to get essentially the look that we're looking for. So I'm going to work with the normal map with DirectX 1. I'm going to test it out actually, because there's a very subtle difference between how the directions will run depending on the normal map you use. So let's jump to now our normal map. All right, so we have this here, very smooth surface still. When light hits it, we're not really seeing any of the grain raised. So we actually want to put in some more information. So we have normal here, and we choose default. For this one, you're gonna have to tell it that you want a normal map, right? Now for the color of the normal map, it's looking for that yellow dot, which tells you where you're looking for a colored image. And so we're gonna navigate up here and choose image texture, and that image texture is going to be, you guessed it, I'm gonna use the OpenGL one and choose that. And what we're seeing now is some here. So let's check something. It says normal, and we have a normal here as well. We're going to use normal map, right? And just make sure that the color chosen is the one that we have that same image texture, and just navigate to our that one. Now if that one doesn't look like it's working, it doesn't seem like it's working as optimally for me, I'm going to try using now the DirectX one, see if there's a difference. And I'm not really seeing much of a difference between either of them. Alright, so that's giving us those. So let's jump to another one. We have roughness, we have displacement as well. Displacement map actually gives us displacement of the material itself. Alright, so let's jump back into this. Alrighty then. So let's now insert our displacement map. So this time we're going to be switching from our regular user interface. We're going to jump to shading view. What that'll do is show us a node setup that we can use in order to get the results that we're looking for. Right? So we're looking through camera view. And again, let me just make sure I turn on screencast keys so that you can see what it's already on. Very great. Good. So this is what we have so far. Maybe what we need to do is add some light in the scene so that it can shine through a bit more. Because we had a point light before and it's not really giving us much in terms of the power. So let's see what that looks like. 0.4. Alright, we have one light there, another we don't have that roughness, that displacement of sorts. Right, so this is what we're seeing now. Our material output, it's all on the surface. The normal map generates a map based on, let's set this up so you can actually see it clearer. So let's see what that looks like now. At the end we have a surface here, right? And we have a displacement map too. So we have our color, which is plugged into this base color. We have our roughness, which is plugged into the roughness value. We have our normal, which is plugged into this normal map. We also have a displacement map, which takes as the input something that looks very similar to this. Right, so let's try something here. I'm gonna move this normal from here to here. What you begin to see is some of that wood grain shining through. Right, it looks rough. You can see the actual grooves. Right. Another thing about this normal map here, this is why we couldn't see any before, because it was not being displaced. So I think we can actually control the strength here, 0 to more, so you can actually control how much of an impact it has. This is 0.1, very subtle. But the thing is, we don't have something that controls our metallic, right? So metallic would essentially use black and white, so black being 0 and white being fully metallic, and that would control how reflective something would be on a surface. So let's see if we can, if what happens when we lower roughness, we get that. So there's no reflectivity at all. If we increase the metalness, then you get to see some more of that in there. Now if we were to click on the roughness value, you'll recognize over on the left side that it shows the image that it's connected to. That's the black and white one. The color is connected to the color one. The displacement is connected to the displacement. Now, for example, if we were gonna say, let's use something to control the roughness value, or rather the metallic value, so that it's not one consistent, what would be the best word to put it? It's not one consistent sheen. You want to have that bit of roughness in there. You want to say control it from 0 to 1. So we could actually use this roughness value here. So if you look at this roughness, it's very relatively gray. What we want to do, we also want to connect it to our metalness. And for example, here roughness is using this alpha value, and that's probably why we're not getting the what we need. What we should be using is the color value to roughness. And now you begin to see that bit of sheen coming through there, right? And our metallic is all the way up there. If we carry this down to less, it begins to look a little bit more natural. Now typically metallic values tend to be either 0 for not metallic or 1 for metallic, and that would tell you if it's a metallic object or not, really. So that's what we have here. And so you begin to see a few things, including this very large scrape that goes around there based on what we see inside our textures. Right? You're seeing this white is because of probably one of the lamps that we have in the scene and how they reflect. So that's probably light. It's going to be white. This one's a warmer looking light. Right? And then this one's a blue light, and you get to see the shadows it's casting there. So let's look through camera view, and this is what we're seeing. Right? Very, 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 very rough. So let's see if we can tweak some of that. So roughness in terms of strength for the normal map, if we put that to 1, we're still seeing it. Right? And so we get an idea of how things can look better depending on different types of maps you put on it. So that essentially is it for the textures. A very quick, very crude, but still very useful tutorial. And I hope it helps. What we want to do now, just for now, is just tidy up some of the lighting there. And I would actually prefer to do that now rather than later. So let's check out our layout. And so we have in top view. I'm gonna see where we actually have our lights. There we go. And in wireframe view, this is what this looks like. Like this. The camera is very large. You can actually scale that down. You won't really change anything much with your view, because we're still seeing the same thing. Yeah. Now let's test out this light. There we go. Ooh, that's bright. Okay, down. Something to note about sun lamps is that they're directional lamps. Whatever the direction is, regardless of how close the sun lamp is to the object, it's just going to cast that kind of a shadow. So that's going to be super bright. Yeah. In cycles, this is what this would look like. In Eevee, it looks more like this. Right? Our real primary issue is these very rough artifacts that we're seeing. It's very, very dark artifacts that we're seeing, and let's change this to OSL. Perhaps not the best option.